Christiana, thank you for speaking with me today. We're gathering at Les Fontaines at a time of deep uncertainty, what you and many of this room have called a polycrisis. It's also been 10 years since the original adoption of the Paris Agreement. Can you tell me a little bit from your vantage point about how you feel the world has changed in those 10 years?
The past 10 years, technology, which is at the basis of addressing climate change, has advanced exponentially, not linearly, but exponentially, opening the Overton window of what is possible and also what is possible within a very restricted time frame. Linear thinking and acting or planning is somewhat irrelevant to the way that the world is working. The other thing that has changed remarkably and also very positively from 10 years ago is the understanding of the interconnectedness of all. But it's not just the interconnectedness of the different aspects of nature. It's actually the interconnectedness of the full web of life on this planet, which includes humans as one species among so many other species. So the understanding of the interconnectedness of all beings and all life on this planet is something that we're, I think, just sort of beginning to scratch the surface of. And I'm excited about the fact that we have opened that chapter. The third thing that I would say has changed is our understanding of both the fragility of life on this planet as well as the resilience of this planet. And both are interconnected. So when I speak about the fragility, I speak about the urgency of climate. I speak about the urgency of biodiversity protection. I speak about the science that tells us every time that we are running out of time and that we are barely squeezing our way through to the possibility of keeping our planet within the boundaries to which we might be able to adapt as humans. The rest of nature has much more tolerance for extreme changes than we do, because the rest of nature adapts to whatever extreme challenges or extreme conditions we have, as she has done.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And those are all very positive changes ultimately, which can give one hope. I'm wondering, Christiana, if you can speak a little bit to how this actually shows up practically. You're talking about not dipping into linear thinking, but busting out of that to systems thinking. You're talking about nature and fragility. How does that show up in our work, in our institutions? Can you give us a couple of examples of where you see that actually taking form and manifesting?
The fact that we have a convention for climate change, a convention for biodiversity, a convention for desertification, a convention for chemicals, on and on and on and on. That is already proof of the fact that we have not understood the interconnectedness of all of this. That there are structures in silos that assume incorrectly that each of these domains stands alone and as an island that does not affect all of the others. I mean, I understand why we did it, because honestly, way back in the 90s and in the beginning of this century, we were still even grappling with, so what is the human responsibility with respect to the rest of nature? And in order to grapple with that huge responsibility, the only way that we could get our arms around this is to go like, okay, let's fragment. Let's put, climate into this little box and biodiversity into this little box. And human rights into this other little box. And we created a whole bunch of boxes. Now, I'm not criticizing the fact that we have put them in the boxes, because it is our human way of beginning to even understand this. What I'm saying is, as we move forward, we have to begin to open those boxes, and while continuing to go deeply into each of the boxes, also at the same time understand the cross linkages between them, because otherwise we are curtailing our capacity to address them in an effective way, because we're only taking the pieces of each of the silos. So the only responsible way to respond to that is to be much more inclusive in our thinking, acting, planning, investing, be much more inclusive of, yes, of the human species, and how do we support our own resilience and our own adaptation to a changed world, but also what do we learn from the other species with whom we share this planet, and also how do we actually not just minimize impact, but actively restore resilience and the capacity to regenerate. It's just not enough to say we're going to keep the status quo such that future generations can actually have that status quo. We have actually interfered so deeply into nature in all of its aspects, into the entire global commons. We have interfered so much that we have not only reached, but breached 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries. So it's not about sustaining the current stasis that we're in. It's about actively regenerating.
Are there places that you see that are doing that well, the regenerative piece, whether it's local communities or countries or organizations, institutions? Are you seeing bright lights anywhere?
At the risk of touting the horn of my own little country, I do think that Costa Rica is doing a great job. We were just several decades ago, we had deforested so much that we were down to 29% of forest cover over the national territory. And we could see the dangers of that, not just for the rest of nature, but also for human habitation and adaptation capacities. So we enacted laws and we put financial structures in place that operate as payments for environmental services that we have now shared with many other countries around the world. And these payment for environmental services have actually led us to increase forest cover from 29 to, I think we're up to 55% now. 55% of our territory, in addition to the fact that 25% of the territory is untouched national parks. But that 55 is actually restored and regenerated territories, and that is something that is possible in Costa Rica, but not only in Costa Rica. In theory, it is possible anywhere, as long as the right policies are in place and followed.
Perhaps that's why you're such a powerful advocate for stubborn optimism, which resonates, among other things. It resonates very much with our symposium's theme of acting with honest hope.
I love the term of honest hope. I love that. Hope being a verb with its sleeves rolled up is my favorite definition of hope.
Christiana, in that context, you've talked about personal transformation and starting with ourselves. And we do know that achieving transformative change requires not just new policies, but a shift in how we think and perhaps even how we feel and what we believe. So I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to what mental models or ways of thinking, acting, being, believing need to shift most urgently.
My favorite topic. I firmly believe that systems approach is radically different from the structured boxed in approaches that we used to have. And they do require an alignment between ways of being and ways of doing. If we understand that systems are living relationships, they are actually dynamic processes that are in constant change and under constant influence. We are personally and internally responsible for a mindset that not only understands the complexity and the paradoxes of systems, but that is courageous enough to let go of thoughts that are top down. We are so used to leadership that is top down, or authority that is hierarchical, or decisions that are taken, at the top and then implemented by the bottom. And in systems, that's not so. In systems, you understand, A, that I never control anything at all, that the most that I can do is to influence, and that my most important engagement is to understand the interconnections and the interactions of all different pieces of the system, but to understand everything that is happening, sort of have a spider web in my head when I look at the particular system that I'm working in, and understand which threads are being pulled over here, which ones are being pulled over here, which ones are being highlighted, and understand that this is constantly a dynamic, and that my role as leader is not to intervene and come in and establish a reality, establish an outcome that I want, but rather to be humble enough and courageous enough to understand that the movement forward will emerge from collective wisdom and from collective participation. And so my role is actually to nourish that ground, to empower, enable, elevate everyone in the system to think and act out of their own highest selves. And that completely elevates what is possible. It is now going to be a composite idea of everyone's experience, everybody's knowledge, everybody's wisdom, and everybody's ownership of the idea.
Amazing. I think you and I could talk about this for a very long time. And I love to be humble and courageous enough. I think those are words that we'll want to carry with us through the symposium. Christiana, I have one more question. And to ask you this question, I just want to read a quote, if you'll allow me, from Clarissa Pinkola Estes, because we are in strange times. And she says, quote, "I have heard from so many recently who are concerned about the state of affairs in our world now. Ours is a time of almost daily astonishment and often righteous rage over the latest degradations of what matters most to civilized visionary people. Yet I urge you, ask you, gentle you, to please not spend your spirit dry by bewailing these difficult times. Especially do not lose hope, most particularly because the fact is that we were made for these times." End quote. So what do you say to this? How do we hold on to hope?
In agreement with that, 150%. And it is so fascinating to me that that we're still with this, reptilian brain that attracts us to the negative, to the drama, to the destruction. We can't deny it, because we have to turn to it, actually embrace it as the reality that we're living. But for me, I reserve my awe for nature and learning that we have from the nature, the rest of nature that surrounds us is infinite. And we're blind to it because we think that our news feed is more important. It is important. Don't deny it. But don't let it crowd out where the learnings come from. Don't let it crowd out where the wisdom the peace, and frankly, the love comes from. If there's one ingredient that is the scarcest resource of all right now, it is kindness, love in all of us. We would have a very different world if the marrow of our bones were filled with kindness and love.
Oh, thank you so much, Christiana. That's so wonderful. And it leaves us with a number of really important words to ponder as we go through the next couple of days: wonder, gratitude, learning, wisdom, love. I hope these are words we can all carry forward with us. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to speak with you. I really appreciate you sharing your insight, your experience, your expertise, your optimism, your head and your heart. And for that, we're deeply grateful. And we appreciate you helping to set us off on the right course for our Currents of Change Symposium. And certainly, we wish you the best in all your very, very good work. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm thrilled that you've got gathering and convening this symposium, because becoming more aware of systemic risk um, should, could, ought to make us also more aware of systemic opportunities and how we hold these two together without falling into the simplistic thinking that they actually cancel each other or that they're mutually exclusive, but rather, how do we bring them together to conform the basis for the energy that we need to move forward is sort of my constant mantra, and so I look forward to learning what you all will be chatting about and concluding.